Freshman Republican congressman and pathologically lying fraud, George Santos, has publicly said that he will not run for re-election after the House Ethics Committee revealed its long-awaited report of their investigation into Santos, and they concluded that he engaged in all kinds of acts of corruption, including fraud and misappropriating campaign funds for things like OnlyFans. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. Not sure what to say here because it's not exactly a shocker other than the fact that Santos says that he's not going to run for re-election, even though that's what he said like 2 or 3 weeks ago. But he's also a pathologically lying fraud. So just because he's saying things on, Thursday doesn't mean that by next Monday he won't change his tune. So let's play this clip kind of recapping the situation, and again, we'll break it down together.
Now to this breaking news, staying in Washington, the House Ethics Committee just released its report on indicted Congressman George Santos. And the big headline from this report, as we're still going through it, they say that there is substantial evidence that Santos violated federal laws. Let's get right to NBC's Julie Sirkin now on Capitol Hill for us. Julie, what else are you reading in this report?
Well, look, this is the work of the committee that has been poring over this topic, investigating Santos, and now we have this report just in a couple of minutes ago. They say that Santos blatantly stole from his campaign, spending campaign funds, according to this report, which we are just going through now, on things like Botox, lavish trips to Atlantic City, on OnlyFans, on designer goods. I mean, really everything under the sun. He misappropriated official campaign funds, again, that were supposed to go to his campaign for personal expenses. The committee is also saying that Santos's conduct warrants public condemnation. They say it was beneath the dignity of the office and has brought severe discredit upon the House. I mean, really going through this report, they are all but recommending that Santos be expelled without really going that far. But the things they are alleging in here is certainly damning on it.
Oof. I mean, listen, the guy's been federally indicted. He's been internationally indicted. He is an ethics disgrace, but I would argue indicative of the modern-day Republican Party, at least with respect to its elected officials. Never forget that this party is the one being led by Donald Trump, who's basically like a living nexus of political and financial corruption. Now, in terms of what the report said, this is like the front page of it. At the completion of its investigation, the ISC unanimously concluded that there was substantial evidence that George Santos knowingly caused his campaign committee to file false or incomplete reports with the FEC, use campaign funds for personal purposes, engage in fraudulent conduct in connection with Redstone Strategies, LLC, and engage in knowing and willful violations of Ethics and Government Act as it relates to financial disclosure statements filed with the House. I mean, it's pretty bad. And then again, he used campaign funds for Botox and for OnlyFans. I mean, just absolutely disgraceful acts. Now, in a statement or screed, I would argue, on Twitter, this is what George Santos had to say. If there was a single ounce of ethics in the Ethics Committee, they would not have released this biased report. The committee went to extraordinary lengths to smear myself and my legal team about me not being forthcoming. My legal bills suggest otherwise. It's a disgusting politicized smear that shows the depths of how low our federal government has sunk. Everyone who participated in this grave miscarriage of justice should be ashamed of themselves. We the people desperately need an Article 5 constitutional convention. We are quickly approaching $34 trillion in debt. The government's continuously on the verge of a shutdown. Our southern border is wide open. Our current president is the head of an influence peddling family, and all this Congress wants to do is attack their political enemies with tit-for-tat unconstitutional censures, impeachments, expulsions, and ethics investigations. The time is now for the states to rise up and commence an Article 5 constitutional convention. And then blah, blah, blah. He just says, I will, however, not be seeking re-election for a second term in 2024, as my family deserves better than to be under the gun from the press all the time. I mean, just pure copium, buddy. I don't even know what to say to that. I mean, he is, again, a disgrace. 80% of his own constituents have wanted him to resign since January, right? Since basically the time that George Santos was sworn in, because he only won election in New York's Long Island district in the midterms, the 2022 midterms, and he was sworn in January. And since basically day one, 80% of his own constituents, according to polls, have wanted him to resign. And the more we find out about it, I mean, just absolutely disgraceful. And that makes what I'm about to show you even more interesting, because you have this Republican congressman, and I just blanked on his name, Warren Davidson from Ohio, who voted against expelling George Santos when the vote came up a couple of weeks ago. And he's asked by CNN, okay, well, in light of this report from the Ethics Committee, which is what many people said they were waiting on, right, including there were many Democrats who voted to protect Santos from expulsion, like Jamie Raskin, whom I love and adore. He said, listen, George Santos is despicable, he's disgusting, but we have an ethics investigation, and the report they say is forthcoming. So let's wait 2 weeks. Let's see what the results of the report are, and we can say we gave George Santos due process, okay? Well, now that report is dropped, it is damning, and this is what this Republican has to say.
You voted not to expel him 2 weeks ago. There could be another vote after Thanksgiving. Where do you stand today?
Yeah, I haven't read the report. I look forward to reading it. Certainly have a lot of respect for Michael Guest, and my understanding is they're presenting this as findings of fact. Now, that's not the same as a trial, and I thought that it was relevant that Manu pointed out that it has been extremely rare that someone's been expelled from Congress without a conviction. So I think that's where the default is for normally people in both parties, although lots of times things get politicized. I've never even spoken with George Santos, so I haven't really had a lot of desire to get to know him. But on the other side, when you look at the precedent is, well, someone gets their day in court, they get the benefit of innocent until proven guilty. On the other hand, I look forward to reading the reports and saying, yeah, does this really make sense?
George Santos is entitled to the presumption of innocence in law, right? In a criminal case, right? No one's talking about depriving him of any sort of constitutional right. Then he is entitled to the presumption of innocence, and he does require a conviction would be required in court to deprive him of constitutional rights. He doesn't have a constitutional right to serve in Congress. That's a privilege, okay? And we should hold our leaders to considerably higher ethical standards than everyday citizens. Now, you should still prove things. There should still be investigations. You shouldn't simply remove people based on, mere aspersions or spurious allegations. But the evidence against Santos is overwhelming. It's everything Republicans wish they had against President Biden. I mean, you're talking about multiple organs of investigation, both in the legislative branch with the Ethics Committee, the executive branch with the FBI and the Department of Justice, international investigations. Brazil's been looking into this guy. So we're talking about like 3 different spheres of investigations, credible indictments, credible evidence offered over a span of 9 months. So the last thing I'll say is Dan Goldman, who is a Democrat from New York as well. He says that even though he voted against, he was the one who originally proposed the initial expulsion proposal of George Santos back in May. Republicans voted to protect him then. And then a few weeks ago, Republicans, some of George Santos's fellow New York Republicans, they brought their own expulsion effort. And even though Goldman pointed out the hypocrisy, he's like, hey, we don't really know anything new about Santos now than we did in May. So why did you vote to protect him in May as opposed to now? Whatever. He says he's going to bring a third attempt to expel George Santos when the Congress reconvenes after Thanksgiving. So I would be shocked, actually, if this one is not successful, because now the pressure will be even more severe. And the excuse that many people on both sides of the aisle had, that they just wanted to wait for the results of the ethics investigation, that will no longer apply because we have those results in hand. Let me know what you think. Do you think George Santos will change his mind? Do you think he'll say that he is running again? Do you think that Republicans will vote to to expel him when Dan Goldman brings the articles of expulsion after Thanksgiving? Let me know what you think in the comments.